Fantastic. Okay, so the purpose of the meeting today is to talk a little bit about techniques for building effective and efficient presentations using a tool which is taught by a company named Mandel, and the tool is called SCIPAB. We're going to talk more about it pretty soon. But before we dive into detail, let's talk a little bit about why are we building presentations in the first place, and why are they effective way of communication. It's an old truism that people are storytellers, and we learn by listening to the stories told by the others. But there is actually a science beyond that, which I just recently learned about that. The science is all about how do we learn, how do we perceive reality. And it explains that the reason we listen to the stories is that reality is just too complicated to comprehend to us. And stories are a form of collective knowledge. So when you think about what makes us different from animals, stories would be one of the important things. There are some animals which are using primitive languages, but very few animals, if any, as far as we can tell, have common beliefs. Believe in the things which are there but are immaterial. You can't touch them. Still many people believe in them. And if you look for examples of such stories, which helps us to communicate, which helps us form society, state would be one, human rights would be a story, money would be story, religion can be perceived as a story. These are all things which no one has ever seen or materially proven that they exist, and yet they function because so many people believe in them. And stories have two functions. They help you filter signal from noise. They help you understand the world better, simplify it. They are generalization, but they also help you communicate with other people who believe in the same story, because by believing in the certain stories, we form tribes, we form trust domains. Why is this important for presentation? Well, number one, the story which I'm receiving needs to match other stories I believe in, because I want those stories to be coherent. Number two, I will accept stories from people I trust essentially. If I don't trust the person, it's very unlikely that I'm going to trust the story that this person is telling me. You can even take that farther. It's not a science anymore. It's more of a speculation. Harari is writing about it in a Sapiens book, that you can think about stories as living organisms, and you can define memetics, which is genetics for those living organisms, by saying that those stories propagate using us as a medium, the same way as viruses propagate using living organisms. And those stories would mutate, they would get into symbiotic relationships. Some stories are coherent with each other, and we tend to form larger stories from them. Some aren't, some are niche, some are popular, and they evolve over time. If you think, for example, about an idea of democracy, which was born in ancient Athens, it's been completely different democracy than it is today, and still it evolved in a continuous way. The important point about it is that because we use stories as handrails to make understanding of the world easier, most people would not want to validate if the stories are true or not, because checking if the story is true is actually more laborsome than understanding the reality. The story is meant to simplify things. So instead of looking for true stories, we're instinctively looking for truthful stories, which is a story which is believable to me and told by somebody who believes in that story genuinely. So I can see that this person is actually telling me something which is true to that person, and that's enough for me to believe in that story if I trust this person. The faster we develop our information landscape, the less we can actually prove, and the more we believe in stories, which is what's making them such a popular medium. So now, when you think about takeaways from that story. You only need to do two things in order for a presentation to be effective. Number one, you need to make it relevant to your audience. You make it click with their existing stories that they have in their head. Number two, you need to deliver that in an authentic way. And we're focused on both, on specific tips and techniques that I gathered in that presentation. Let's start with how to make content relevant. A common method when you try to assemble some slides in a hurry is to just take some slides from here, take some slides from there, assemble them together, and kind of hope for good. And I'm guilty of that as well, of course. I've done this many times. I would argue here, following the Mandel methodology, that this is a wrong way to approach the subject. It's probably better to have less graphically compelling story in your slides, but more coherent in terms of getting buy-in from your audience. And in order to do that, you need to, when you're repeating somebody else's presentation as is, and you believe in it, that's fine. But when you try to combine slides coming from multiple sources, they are typically communicating more than what you want to say, and then they're not communicating some other things, and it will eventually show up. So what Mandel is prescribing here is start with your objective, what you want the audience to do, and who the audience is. And that is already challenging sometimes, because this objective, this main core message, needs to be one sentence. If you cannot articulate in one sentence what you want your audience to do after you finish presentation, you're in trouble in the very beginning, because it's unlikely that they will come out remembering the sequence of things you want them to do in the same shape as you're communicating it to them. And sometimes this comes up in educational presentations where you're running a training. I do believe that presentation is a medium for convincing people to do things. It can be used for other purposes, but the main place where it really shines is to tell the people to do something and hope that they will do that. So this main objective, something that you want to get through, is super important. And then once you have that, express that in the SCIPAB way. SCIPAB is situation, complication, implication, proposal, benefits, and action. It's a ladder-like structure which helps you validate the message very quickly. Situation is something which is hard to dispute. Complication is an event which makes it uncomfortable for your audience. Implication is all the consequences of it named. Proposition is what you want them to achieve. Benefits is what you want them to take out of this. And action is the immediate thing you want to do after the presentation. I'll show you an example shortly. The benefit of framing it like this is that these things come one after another. So it's unlikely that if your customer does not agree with complication, that they will buy into implication. It's also unlikely that if they disagree with implication, that they will buy into proposition. And these things help you validate very quickly in a form of the elevator pitch, if the story is relevant to your audience. It is also, interestingly, a good handrail for building content, because you very quickly see where the gap is, what you don't have. And it also helps you deal with different formats of the meeting efficiently. So assume you're entering a C-level meeting and it was supposed to be 20 minutes, but now you hear, well, by the way, we just have 10. So how do you make sure that this person gets the full message without going into details and can decide if it's worth spending more time on? And what Mandel is saying, once you build SCIPAB, you only then can go into crafting additional stories, gathering data, supporting your point in a detailed way, and eventually building slides to deliver it. So now, to make it more specific, an example for selling CI to the customer who has, say, a configurator app. Let's say it's a travel agency and they have a configurator app for selling extras which are more high margin than typically just a trip. The situation is something which they want dispute. Lead time for changes in the configurator app is too long, releases are not stable. This is something that we either know from the market research or we know from talking to the other stakeholders with this customer. This is something which is given. Now, complication is configurator adoption is low. This is already giving some discomfort, but here your audience can argue. They can say, yeah, well, it is low, but it's not because of that long lead time. It's for whatever other reason, you know, the color scheme of the configurator is not seen on a device or whatever. But if they buy into this, you can move further and say, well, the implication is then that you lose revenue. This is already serious. This is painful, because if they lose revenue, the project might get canceled, people might be reassigned, or they might lose jobs. If this is true, then we can move to the proposal. Automate all your tests and execute them in full and provide visibility, right? If they agree with this, action benefit can actually be reversed. If you want the message to be, if you think that they don't really understand proposal, you can come up with benefit first, get visibility on quality of each build, eliminate waiting time and handovers, and eventually action is something you want them to do right after the presentation. Schedule a workshop with us where we can show you how to do it. And it sometimes can be showing you in a powerful way that that your audience is disconnected already at this stage. To give you an example, I've been making a presentation for automotive sector in Germany selling our security capabilities. And pretty quickly, I have understood that they're not really interested. And when we started drilling why, it turned out that they do not even automate their quality tests just yet. So the idea of automated security tests was just out of this world for many of the audiences, because their existing tests were manual. They haven't had that assumption that CI/CD must be automated in the first place. And that's fair. You don't want to teach how to run before you teach how to walk. So that's a sign that the message is probably wrong at this point in time to this particular audience. Another example, selling toolchain integration situation is you have best of breed components orchestrated by custom portal. Hard to dispute. Complication upgrades are absolute nightmare. Now, they can disagree with this. They can say, oh, we're doing fine with that, but likely it's going to either cost them money and people, or be complicated, or both. If it is, then the implication is that it's costly, 6 FTE, developers likely hate it, and they're probably running on an outdated version of tools. And then it logically flows into proposal, migrate to GitLab, which is a single platform for entire DevOps, because when you do it, you will reduce operational overhead, get better visibility, and make developers happy. And if they say, yes, but how do we do that? Start with a single project pilot. So that's just another example of how SCIPAB can be put into action. Once you have SCIPAB, the way to build slides based on SCIPAB is to start with SCI and then PAB, and not necessarily on 2 slides or 6 slides. It doesn't matter. You need to somehow communicate that message, because that helps you get the buy-in. And if this is effective, then you go with illustrating that with side ideas which support the case, and help you get the customer into that state of understanding how exactly things should work. And when you do it, close your presentation with another PAB reiteration. It's not the same, not exactly the same message, because customers in a different mental state. They already absorbed your ideas, and now they can understand better how exactly this proposal is going to work, what exactly the benefit are going to be in context of their existing situation, and they can understand their action better too. And the benefits, just to reiterate once again on this, SCIPAB gives you a good elevator pitch. Even if you don't have a chance to show your slides at all, remembering SCIPAB can, in 2 minutes, getting you in the elevator with somebody, give them a message which is easy to remember and easy to repeat, and it propagates better within a customer account. It helps you discover if the message fits early or get objections and then reshape the message, and helps you build the presentation quickly, even if you end up just with a SCIPAB. You say you learned about the meeting 10 minutes before and you don't really have time to build slides. Having a SCIPAB and a whiteboard can be an effective way of communicating idea too. Only then, once you had that structure in place, all those rules for building effective slides, which are common knowledge, like slides should be dense enough in terms of amount of slides per time. People say 1 per 2-3 minutes, but I think online delivery, which is now so common because of coronavirus, enforces sometimes even more than this. 5x5 rule, which is not too many words in a bullet and not too many bullets on a slide, to make it readable and make people focus on what you're talking about, not what is written on a slide. Image is better than 1,000 words, of course. And interesting one, which I discovered only recently, dark slides tend to sip energy. So don't make most of your presentation dark, because people will kind of go down in their energy levels. And then second part of this, next to being relevant, is how to deliver effectively. Well, good news is, in the first place, that since you are telling your own story, it already feels much more authentic, much more natural, much more easy flowing, and because the story is yours. But there is also some other techniques, some of them being adopted from, most of them being adopted from the trainings on presentation techniques delivered for the physical delivery. But most of them surprisingly applies to Zoom as well. So number one is posture. You can't see how I'm sitting right now, but I bet you can feel it in my voice. I mean, if I'm sitting straight, shoulders erect, head up, I will be speaking in very much different way from I would be doing if I was sitting like in a super relaxed position. Flat feet on the ground help you gesture in a more convincing way. There's no really eye contact in a Zoom presentation, but you definitely should be doing something which I'm not doing right now because my laptop has a failed battery and I need to be on a short cable here, which is having camera on the eye level. It is as close as you can get to the actual eye contact, and investment of a camera which is like at the eye level for 20 euro is more than worth it. There is no analog for scenic movement in the Zoom presentation. We have to live with that. Gestures have limited applicability because most people are anyway looking at the slide, not at the presenter at the same time. Pausing and articulation is getting even more important. It's actually super important in couple situations. When you want to stress something, when you're answering questions, or when you're asking questions. Imagine there's a Q&A session and you're asking me the question, what's your favorite color? And I can say it's pink. Or I can pause and say, so you want to know what my favorite color is? Well, that would be pink. That shows attention when you're addressing the question. It works the other way too. So when somebody's asking the question and I give them those 2 seconds pause after asking the question, people feel uncomfortable with silence. Sometimes you are going to get a justification. I'm asking this question because I want to know something, this and that. A little bit more context, which helps to address that question in a relevant way. And there is also interaction part in this, for which using polls proves to be surprisingly effective. Some people tend to whiteboard even during online presentations, and there is a good rule for whiteboarding which applies both online and offline, which is if you do it, say what you want to introduce on a drawing, then draw it by being silent, and then talk about it. Don't do those two things at the same time, because it tends to confuse both the audience and the presenter. So trying to recap it all, 6 reasons why SCIPAB is cool is because it helps you build the content which is relevant by researching the audience and deliver it in an authentic way, and it's also saving your time. It gives you quick feedback and helps you adjust the meeting schedule on the fly, and also helps win attention, especially for executives very early in the meeting. And the story is getting a bit more personal, authentic, and hopefully memorable. With this, I'm done with the content which I wanted to share for today. Do you have any questions?
Michal, I have a quick question regarding the presentation, because I understand the theory pretty well, right? It all makes sense, but do they suggest a sort of, let's say, example ideal presentations or something like that, where we can actually learn by looking at?
The way Mandel does their trainings is they're prescribing a lot of practice. And this practice is happening in groups, because the best source of feedback is a group of colleagues who are looking at your presentation. Those presentations, they are not necessarily even business presentations. You choose random subject, and then you prepare and talk about it, and other people are watching this, and you're also recording this for your own reference. And then you discuss this. You discuss the recording sitting together and saying, this could be done in different way, perhaps, or I felt this when you said that, or I got lost when you presented this concept. And that helps you work with the live audience and actually, understand better how effective is what you're naturally doing, and observe yourself. It's pretty powerful type of exercise, this one.
Okay, so is it going to be an action for us after this meeting? Because all you said, and actually the concepts presented here, they all make sense. But now we have to take some action. I don't know. We have to practice to build them up. And I think that this framework might be very useful. And I'm going to share with AEs as well, because this is something I'm missing from their presentations a lot of times.
It's very true. And I think it would be great to form an informal group where we could just rotationally present something short. It doesn't have to be, terribly extensive. It could be 10 minutes presentations, and maybe we could have even like 2 or 3 per session if people are willing to do that. And a broader group listening to them and then commenting. We could have a wiki with those videos for people to learn. I like the idea. We can have our own Toastmasters club this way.
Sort of, yes. Please don't be in for that. Thank you, Michal. I have to drop now, but just quick feedback. I like it a lot because it stops us from going through the motions when doing a presentation. We've done it so many times that we just are like, we just hit the play button in our mind and we go through it. But a framework like this actually forces us to think about what we're doing and then be authentic in the sense that pay attention to the prospect of the meeting that we have, and then take relevant, or first of all, think about relevant actions for this prospect and then plan accordingly. So really good. Thank you. I must drop now because I've got a customer call.
Thank you, Sri.
I was interested, you mentioned about the dark slides. I did a presentation skills course probably about 5 years ago. I can't remember the methodology, but they said exactly the opposite. and all their material was on dark slides. Yeah.
Interesting. I was going through this material which I got, which is still on paper, and it's probably like 6 years old now. And I've seen some elements there which I don't believe anymore. And I've picked the one which I think work for me, but it still turns out that it's a little bit of a personal experience, right? So I don't have a scientific proof for this. And it might turn out that for you, the reverse is true, or maybe none of this is true. Maybe it's just something which was transient. Because one of the aspects of this is that when you're using certain technique for telling stories, and many people do, and they become widespread, your audience will tend to develop immunity to them. They will just like like new type of logo. They will blend into the background, and then you need to come up with something even more creative or just different in order to do it. So some of those things might be phasing out. Good remark, though.
Can you just share the location to the deck? Because I happen to be creating a new presentation over the next couple of days, as you know. So
absolutely, I'll put that in the meeting notes, which I'll add to the invitation.
Thanks, Mikhail. I really appreciate that. Yeah, the light versus dark slides is an interesting one. I've just done a quick Google and it's like, whoa, it depends on whether it's a short presentation or a long presentation. If it's long, it should be dark. If it's short, it should be light. So who knows? Anyway, but yeah, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And it's got us talking about it, if nothing else. Anyway.
All right. If there's no more questions, let me stop recording now.